The year was 1865, and the Montana frontier stretched vast and unbroken, a land carved by rivers and rimmed with jagged peaks. Beneath the endless sky, a wagon train crawled along a dusty trail, wheels creaking, hooves stirring the dirt in heavy plumes. The Whitmore family rode in silence, weary from the road, but hopeful still. Clara Whitmore sat beside her younger brother, Samuel, inside the covered wagon, her hands folded in her lap. She had always imagined the West as something golden and full of promise, but weeks on the trail had eroded that dream. The air was thick with dust, the nights bitterly cold. They had lost a horse 2 days prior, and the strain on their remaining team was evident. Her father's face had grown harder, his voice clipped when he spoke. A sharp gust lifted the canvas, and her mother's voice came from the driver's seat. "Clara, fetch some water from the canteen." She nodded, reaching for the jug at her feet. As she leaned forward, something caught her eye, a shimmer in the distance, low against the setting sun. A trick of the light, perhaps. She squinted. No, riders. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, reined in his horse. "Hold up." The call rippled down the line, other wagons slowing. Clara's pulse quickened. The riders came fast, kicking up dust, their figures dark against the light. "Bandits," someone muttered. Then the first shot rang out. The air cracked, and a man in the lead wagon tumbled from his seat, blood blooming across his chest. Horses reared, women screamed. Clara's father shouted something, reaching for his rifle, but more shots erupted. The bandits, rough men with scarves pulled over their faces, charged into the caravan like wolves into a sheepfold. Clara's mother yanked her down just as a bullet tore through the canvas above. Her father fired once, twice, then staggered back with a choke sound, his hand pressed to his side. Samuel cried out. "Pa!" Thomas Whitmore collapsed. A hand seized Clara's wrist, dragging her from the wagon. She kicked, screamed, but a rough arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her clean off the ground. She was thrown across a saddle, the breath knocked from her lungs. Samuel was still in the wagon, frozen in terror. She reached for him. "Run!" The bandit's boot caught her ribs. "Stay down, girl." She gasped, pain lancing through her side. The world spun as the horse lurched forward, carrying her away from the only life she had ever known. Darkness fell swiftly over the valley, swallowing the last echoes of gunfire. Clara woke to the stench of unwashed bodies and burnt meat. Her wrists ached, rubbed raw by the rope binding them. She was slumped against a wooden post, knees drawn to her chest. The bandits' camp sprawled before her, a crude collection of tents and wagons nestled in a rocky hollow. Across the fire, Jed Blacktooth McGraw sat sharpening his knife, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. His face was pockmarked, his beard patchy, but it was the missing tooth that had given him his name. He had been the one to take her, the one who had laughed when she had begged for her brother's life. Now he grinned. "You got spirit, girl. I like that." She did not answer. "Thing is," he continued, "I need a girl who knows how to mind her place." He flicked the blade, testing its edge. "You'll learn." Her stomach turned. A man approached, younger, leaner, his hat pulled low. "She ain't worth much like this, McGraw. She'll fight you every step." McGraw chuckled. "That's half the fun." The younger man hesitated, then spat. "We should sell her. The trade'll be through in a week. We got mouths to feed." McGraw's expression darkened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pushed to his feet and strode toward Clara. She braced herself, but he only grabbed her chin, tilting her face. "Pretty thing," he mused. "Might fetch a decent price." She jerked away. McGraw laughed and released her. "Rest up, girl. You got a long road ahead." The men drifted away, leaving her alone beneath the cold stars. She thought of Samuel. Was he alive? Had he escaped? A tear slipped down her cheek, but she did not sob. She would not let them see her break. Days passed in a haze of exhaustion. They forced her to carry water, to cook over the fire, to fetch supplies from the wagons. Any disobedience was met with a cuff to the head or a sharp boot to the ribs. One evening, as she kneeled by the river's edge, scrubbing a pot, she sensed movement in the trees. Her pulse quickened. She glanced toward the camp, McGraw and his men were drinking, shouting over a dice game. Slowly, she turned back to the trees. A man stood there. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair tied back with leather. His bare chest was streaked with ochre, his arms marked with lines of war paint. A bow rested in his hand, an arrow already nocked. A Salish warrior. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a flick of his fingers, he gestured for her to be silent. Her heart hammered. He was watching the bandits, not her. Then he disappeared, melting into the shadows. She returned to camp, but sleep did not come. The warrior had seen her, and he had let her see him. Hope, fragile but undeniable, took root. Night fell again, thick and moonless. The camp quieted, save for the occasional grunt of the sentries. Clara lay curled near the fire, the iron shackle still locked around her ankle. Then came a sound. Soft, careful. She turned her head, just as a hand covered her mouth. She tensed, eyes wide. The Salish warrior crouched beside her, his gaze steady. He pressed a finger to his lips, then motioned to the lock. He was here for her. Her breath hitched. With practiced efficiency, he produced a thin piece of metal, working it into the lock. Minutes passed, each second stretching unbearably long. A click. The shackle fell away. He pulled her to her feet, guiding her toward the shadows. They had taken barely 3 steps when a voice rang out. "Hey, McGraw." A gun cocked. "Run," the warrior whispered. Then chaos. McGraw fired, but the warrior was already moving. He struck the nearest bandit, knocking him flat, then spun, loosing an arrow that buried itself in McGraw's shoulder. Clara ran. She tore through the brush, branches slashing at her arms. Behind her, shouts and gunfire erupted. The warrior caught up in 2 strides, gripping her wrist. This way. She didn't question him. Together, they vanished into the night, leaving the bandits cursing in the darkness. For the first time in weeks, Clara was free. The night swallowed them whole, a vast and endless blackness broken only by the rhythmic pounding of their feet against the damp earth. The warrior's grip on Clara's wrist was firm but not cruel, guiding her through the labyrinth of trees with the confidence of a man who knew every root, every hollow, every whisper of the wind that signaled danger. The bandits' voices had faded behind them, but the fear of pursuit clawed at her chest. She stumbled over an exposed root, barely catching herself before she fell. The warrior stopped, his sharp eyes flicking toward her. Without a word, he crouched and placed his hand flat against the earth. He listened. Clara held her breath, straining to hear whatever he heard. Nothing but the wind through the trees, the distant hoot of an owl. They stopped, he murmured, his voice low and sure. She swallowed hard. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "They won't follow far. They fear these woods." A shiver ran through her. She had never believed in spirits or curses, but if something could make men like McGraw hesitate, she wasn't about to question it. The warrior rose to his full height and looked down at her. Even in the dim light, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the strength in his jaw. "You are safe for now." She didn't know how to respond. The truth was, she had never felt safe. Not since the attack. Not since her father had fallen from the wagon, blood pooling in the dust. But this man, this stranger, had risked his life to free her. She owed him more than silence. "Thank you," she whispered. He studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Without another word, he turned and started walking again. She hesitated only a second before following. The forest thickened around them, the canopy blotting out the sky. Clara had no sense of direction, but the warrior moved with purpose, never hesitating, never looking back. The silence between them stretched, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken things. Finally, she found her voice. "What's your name?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, "Tax." She tried the name on her tongue. Tax. A small flicker of something. Amusement, maybe, crossed his face, but it was gone before she could be sure. "You are Clara," he said, more statement than question. She nodded, surprised he knew. "I have watched the bandits camp for many nights. I heard them speak of you." His tone darkened. "McGraw called you his prize." A wave of sickness rolled through her. but she forced herself to stand straighter. Not anymore. Tax glanced at her, and this time, the corner of his mouth lifted in the barest hint of approval. They walked for what felt like hours, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. Just when she thought she might collapse, the trees parted to reveal a narrow river, its waters shimmering silver under the stars. Tax knelt at the bank and scooped a handful to drink. Clara hesitated, then did the same, the cool water easing the rawness in her throat. "We rest here," he said. She didn't argue. Her legs ached, her feet throbbed. She lowered herself onto the damp ground, curling her arms around her knees for warmth. Tax sat a short distance away, watching the trees. His stillness was unnerving, like he was carved from the same stone as the cliffs that loomed in the distance. After a long silence, he spoke. "Where will you go?" Clara stared at the river. She had no answer. The wagon train was gone. Her family was gone. "I don't know," she admitted. He studied her for a moment. "You cannot stay in these lands alone. I don't have a choice." He exhaled, something like frustration passing over his features. Then, as if coming to a decision, he said, "My village is 2 days' walk from here. I will take you there." She looked at him, startled. "Why?" His dark eyes met hers, unwavering. "Because you are not meant to die here." Her breath caught. He said it so simply, as if it were a fact written in the stars. And yet, it was the first time in weeks that someone had spoken of her life as if it mattered. She nodded. "All right." The next morning, they walked. The journey was grueling. They moved through thick brush, crossed icy streams, climbed rocky inclines where one misstep could send them tumbling. Tax moved like a man who belonged to the land, his footsteps careful but sure. Clara struggled to keep up, but she refused to complain. She had survived worse. By midday, hunger gnawed at her stomach. Tax must have noticed because he handed her a small pouch filled with dried meat and berries. She took it gratefully, chewing slowly. "Do you always travel alone?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "Not always." She waited, but he said nothing more. That evening, they stopped in a meadow where the grass swayed like waves in the breeze. Tax built a small fire, careful to keep the flames low. As they sat in the flickering light, Clara found herself watching him. "You don't talk much," she said. His lips twitched. "You talk enough for both of us." She let out a soft laugh, the sound foreign to her own ears. It had been so long since she had laughed. For a moment, the weight of everything, the attack, her capture, the fear, felt a little lighter. But as the fire burned low, a shadow crossed Tax's face. He was listening to something she couldn't hear. Then he stood. "Stay here." Her stomach nodded. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He moved like a ghost into the darkness, disappearing beyond the fire's reach. Clara's heart pounded. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to stay put. Minutes dragged by. Then, from the trees, she heard it, voices. Not Tax. Bandits. Panic surged through her veins. They had found her. Footsteps neared, crunching over dry leaves. Clara shrank back, her fingers digging into the earth. A figure emerged from the trees. Not Tax. McGraw. His shoulder was bandaged, his face twisted with rage. His gun glinted in the dim firelight. "Thought you could run, girl," he sneered. Her mouth went dry. She searched for something, anything to defend herself, but he was too close, too fast. Then, an arrow whistled through the air. McGraw jerked. His gun clattered to the ground. A strangled sound left his lips before he crumpled, Tax's arrow buried deep in his chest. Silence. Then, from the darkness, Tax stepped forward, his bow still raised, his expression unreadable. Clara exhaled shakily, her body trembling with delayed terror. Tax stood over McGraw's body, nudging him with his foot. Satisfied he was dead, he turned to Clara. "He won't hurt you again." She swallowed hard, nodding. But she knew what this meant. The bandits would not stop. Not until every last one of them was dead. Tax seemed to read her thoughts. "They will come," he said, "but we will be ready." And for the first time, Clara believed it. The sun bled across the horizon in streaks of crimson and gold, staining the sky like a battlefield left in ruin. Tax moved ahead of Clara, his steps deliberate, his bow slung over his shoulder. Every so often he stopped to listen, his head tilting slightly, reading the land the way a man reads a familiar story. The scent of pine was thick in the air, masking the coppery hint of blood that still clung to Clara's clothes. She hadn't spoken much since McGraw fell. His death should have brought relief, but it only left the weight of certainty pressing heavier on her chest. The bandits would come for revenge. Men like them did not forgive, did not forget. The land sloped downward, leading them into a valley where the trees grew taller, their shadows long and twisting. Tax stopped near a fallen log and turned to her. "We cannot go straight to my village," he said. Clara's pulse quickened. "Why? They will track us. If we lead them there, more will die." His jaw tightened. "We must finish this first." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had spent weeks in fear of McGraw and his men. To think of facing them, on purpose, felt like stepping off a cliff and trusting the wind to catch her. But then she looked at Tax. The way he stood, shoulders squared, his face carved from stone. He did not fear them, and neither would she. "What do we do?" she asked. A flicker of something, respect, maybe, crossed his face. "We make them come to us." They spent the next few hours preparing. Tax led Clara to higher ground, where the rocky cliffs provided a vantage point over the narrow valley below. He moved with quiet efficiency, setting traps, marking vantage points, making sure that when the bandits came, they would be funneled into the worst possible position. Clara helped where she could. She gathered dry branches for a fire, stacked rocks for cover, and watched as Tax laid sharpened stakes in the undergrowth. Every movement had purpose. Every step brought them closer to the moment when the bandits would arrive. By nightfall, the plan was set. They would wait until the bandits were deep in the valley, their escape routes cut off. Then, Tax would strike first from above, picking them off one by one. If any got too close, Clara would be ready with the rifle Tax had taken from McGraw's body. She held it now, the weight unfamiliar in her hands. She had seen her father shoot before, but she had never fired a weapon herself. Tax must have noticed her hesitation. He stepped close, his voice low. "You do not have to fight." She looked up at him, seeing the firelight flicker in his dark eyes. "Yes, I do." He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. The night stretched on, thick with waiting. The wind howled through the cliffs, carrying whispers of something unseen. Clara shifted where she sat, rubbing her hands together for warmth. Then, faintly, barely more than a breath, she heard it. Distant hoofbeats. Her breath caught. She turned to Tax. He was already on his feet, bow in hand, his expression unreadable. "They are coming." The first rider entered the valley just past midnight. He was a scout, moving slow, his rifle across his lap. Tax waited in the shadows, hidden among the rocks above. The man rode further in, glancing left, right. An arrow cut through the silence. The scout tumbled from his horse without a sound. For a moment, all was still. Then, the distant thunder of hooves grew louder. The others were coming fast. Clara tightened her grip on the rifle, her heart hammering. The first wave of riders galloped into the valley. 5 men, maybe 6. They saw the fallen scout too late. Tax loosed another arrow, and another. A second man fell, then a third. Shouts rang out. The remaining riders wheeled their horses, searching the darkness. "Up there," one of them bellowed. A gun fired. A bullet ricocheted off the rock near Clara's foot. She gasped, ducking lower. Tax moved fast, loosing another arrow before rolling back into cover. Below, the bandits dismounted, spreading out. "Come out, you coward," one of them snarled. "Face us like a man." Tax didn't answer. Instead, he raised his bow and fired. The man's scream echoed off the cliffs. The others charged forward. Clara lifted the rifle, bracing it against her shoulder the way Tax had shown her. A figure moved below, half hidden in the shadows. She inhaled sharply, squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the night. The man stumbled back, clutching his side. Not dead, but wounded. Clara's breath came fast and shallow. She had hit him. A gun fired from below, and she barely had time to duck before the bullet struck the rock beside her. Splinters of stone bit into her cheek. Tax grabbed her arm, pulling her behind cover. "Stay low." More gunfire erupted. The valley became chaos, bullets striking rock, arrows slicing through the air. One of the bandits triggered one of Tax's traps, a hidden pit lined with sharpened stakes. His scream was brief, but more were coming. Tax loosed another arrow, then another. Clara steadied the rifle again, taking aim. She fired, missed. A figure broke through the undergrowth, one of the bandits, his knife gleaming in the moonlight. He was too close. Clara swung the rifle up, but he was faster. He lunged. A hand grabbed her wrist, yanking her backward. "Tax!" He shoved Clara behind him as the bandit slashed. Tax dodged, twisted, then drove his own knife deep into the man's gut. The bandit gasped, his body convulsing before going still. Tax pulled the knife free, his breathing steady. The valley had gone quiet. Clara's pulse pounded in her ears. She turned, searching the darkness. Bodies littered the ground below. The few remaining bandits had fled. It was over. She exhaled, her hands shaking as she lowered the rifle. Tax looked at her. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his eyes dark with something she couldn't name. He stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Then, slowly, he reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek, where the rock had cut her. Clara held still, her breath catching. For weeks, she had known only fear, only cruelty. Now, for the first time, she felt something else. She felt safe. Tax let his hand drop, stepping back. "We should go." Clara nodded. "Yes." As they left the valley behind, she glanced back once, taking in the battlefield, the bodies, the blood staining the earth. And for the first time, she felt free.